Hello, everyone. This is JD Calderon, and this is Indie Comics Explained. And again, today I've brought us another fabulous guest. But before we get to him, please like, subscribe, share out the video. And I also have an Indiegogo running currently for the Oswald Chronicles, so please go check it out and help out the channel. Anyway, so without further ado, here's our esteemed guest, Mike W. Belcher. How you doing, Mike?
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good. All right. So, Mike, let's get right into it. All right. So, I got a series of questions I just like to ask, and this is one of my favorites because I find it fascinating to find where a person got their first spark.
Yeah.
All right. So, little Mike, where did little Mike find his first inspiration? Where he saw that book, because we all started as little kids, reading comics, some random comic we got, right? But what was that book that you got that you said, that's what I want to do? That's the thing I want to do.
I don't know if it was one single book, but it was one of those kind of things that dawn on you. As a kid, I don't remember a time not having comics in my hand. I mean, it just... they were bought for me very young, and they were always there. But I can remember Byrne's Fantastic Four, and realizing, hey, he got paid to do this, and it's one of those things where you get to be 11 or 12 or 13, and someone says, hey, what do you want to do when you grow up? And it's like, hey, this guy's getting paid to do this awesome work. That's what I want to do. And I would have to say it's probably anything that Byrne did. Anything John Byrne did, absolutely. That was the first thing that really popped out at me and thought, give it a try. That's probably about it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Now, other than Byrne, was there anybody else you were following around? Like, I mean, obviously, there's Byrne. I mean, his run on Superman, his run on,
Yeah, the Superman run is probably, I mean, as much as I enjoyed the Fantastic Four, probably the Superman, because until the Superman run, really the Christopher Reeve movies were probably my vision of Superman, because the books in DC were putting out the time. As much as I like Chris Swan, they just weren't really kind of hitting me. But Byrne taking over Superman, that really probably pushed me over the edge as far as wanting to create books, and as far as wanting something that really, as far as maybe a future career,
I got you.
But as far as creators, probably once you get in that frame of mind of these guys being people you can follow, Frank Miller, I came along in 85, 86 with that perfect storm of post-crisis DC stuff, and all this stuff just kind of was right there for the picking. So Miller and George Perez and those guys, when you start seeing their names, and it's like, I want to pick up everything they did, and Matt Wagner, with Demon, and just the things that you get to, the things you got to see. Yeah, so probably those. I mean, I could probably list 100. So, yeah.
It's funny you mentioned Matt Wagner's Demon. It was just 4 issues, right? Limited series. And it's funny because he got really beat up back in the day. I don't know if you remember that, because a lot of people that didn't like his version of it. And I love it.
I can't imagine that, because 86, 87 when it came out, there was no internet, so I didn't really hear that kind of buzz. But I mean, I was blown away by it.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that was just the version for me. I mean, I know there was a Kurt. I later learned that Kirby, and that's where it came from. But gosh, that 4 issues, and it was just so disappointing that nothing happened afterwards, because it was just it left you with something. It's like, hey, I want to see what happens next, and that wasn't the case.
Yeah, no, I was getting. I used to get the Comic Buyer's Guide in the mail, and that's where I saw him getting, the what for from various people.
Yeah.
So it was just like, well, just why?
That's fantastic. I'll have to check something like that. I didn't realize he got any kind of gut for that, because I thought it was a wonderful series.
Oh yeah. I thought it was incredible. I recently purchased the trade that came out, reread it. It holds up. It holds up very well. Yeah. Great stuff. All right. So moving on. So Mike, like, what type of since we're new to each other, so what is your history in comics? So I know you have your current project you're working on. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But I mean, how far back do you go as far as comics creation? How long have you been working in in the indie circle?
Uh, on and off, probably since the late '90s. I did some lettering. That was
Mm-hmm.
kind of my thing in the about '97, '98. I did some lettering for a bunch of little companies. Some saw publication, some didn't, and it kind of came to an end. And I had a
Mm-hmm.
big break where I really wasn't doing anything, and you 9 to 5 job or the things like that. You just didn't have time for it. But it was something I kind of held on to and never really let go, despite many times saying that I was going to. But it was always there.
Mm-hmm.
Even if I wasn't working, it was always there, and I was, when you're a teenager, you wanted to do Marvel, DC, you wanted to work for these independent companies. But when I hit my 20s, I guess I got really stubborn, and if I knew once I did it, I was going to be very indie, and I was very going to be on my own, my thing, and my stories, and take it from there. And I just held on to it. I probably held on to it for a lot longer, and it took me, I probably did it a lot later in life than some people do. But
Mm-hmm.
now the way I'm looking at it now, it's better late than never.
This is true. This is true. It's never too late. That's how I look at
Yeah,
it.
exactly. That's what I've
Yeah.
learned. Yeah, I mean, like I said, the few books that I lettered, I got to know people in the industry,
Mm-hmm.
and luckily I got to know some really good people in the industry that I was able to keep in touch with, and again, I always learn things.
Mm-hmm.
You keep up with things, and you see the trends, and I kind of go against those. I mean, but I never let go of the dream.
Mm-hmm. No, no, it's. I started self-publishing in 91, 92.
Okay.
Um, just out of high school, group of friends that I met at school, art and design in New York City, Manhattan, and we produced annuals because we were young and not too on the ball, But I've been at it ever since. So I mean, it's never too late, man. I think it's fantastic, and I seen the work that you're putting in, and it looks great. But like I said, we'll get to that a little bit later. So,
Yeah.
so, so what type of history you have as far as like art training? Did you go to art school, or you just self-taught? How did you go about
I'm
that?
completely self-taught. I had a few
Mm-hmm.
art classes, but I can't say they contributed to anything as far as me stringing anything together. It was kind of art class here, art class there. Basically, I call myself a kid in this room, and just looking at comics, and I know some pure artists would probably think that's not the way you learn, but that's how I did, and it was a good majority of my years, because I certainly enjoyed, like I said, scribbling in the back of my room, and just kind of living my own little uh, comic world, and that kind of a thing, and like I said, self-taught.
Mm-hmm. All right, cool. Now, your process for creating a book. Now, there's some people, they're plotters, and they're what they like to refer to as pantsers, right?
Yeah.
So, so do you like to, are you plot heavy? Like, do you sit down and do you draw your little strings and you look like you're an FBI agent and you're trying to get everything together? Or do you just sit down and be like, all right, we're just going to go for it?
I'm a complete pantser.
Uh,
I have an idea in my head, but I really just kind of, I mean, being how I do the whole thing, I don't even do a script. I mean, I really just have this idea in my head, and I have a stack of paper, and I just kind of hit it. I've got loose little notes in my head, and kind of maybe
mhm,
scribbled around here and there as far as each issue I'm going to do, but it's completely improv. I found that as I've gotten older, and also I'm a graphic designer by day, so a lot of
mhm,
my stuff is kind of improv, and I don't follow a lot of stuff. I kind of just make it up as I go. And so when I was trying to come up with, how do I do this comic thing,
mhm,
I realized that a lot of steps were going to slow me down. And over the years, I would try scripts, and it's like I'm the same guy drawing it. I don't need this, formalized script. And I felt like, my own little way of just kind of making it up as I went. I liked what I was doing with it. It kept it really fresh,
mhm,
and actually scripting the dialogue as I was lettering it. I found myself maybe changing direction. So yeah, my process is just really just kind of sit down, do it, and until you hit that last page, there's just always things that can be adjusted, anything can be, changed. I mean, I've changed whole intensive pages by the time I get to lettering, just because that's the great part of doing comics. I mean, this isn't like a big movie set where it's millions of dollars. I mean, I can do anything I want to at any time. I can redo a page in a day, and I'm back on schedule. There's nothing that keeps me from doing it. That's what I love about it. It's just so accessible. It's so adaptable to doing so many different ways of creation. There's not one way of doing it. I mean, I've worked with other people. I've had a few little, since I started this, I've had a few little scripts that other people sent me that I did little short stories for. And so I know that process, and it certainly makes me not want to do it for mine. So like I said, my stuff's very improv. Anything that you read in my page, it's very much improv. It's got a very loose skeleton, but I let it kind of direct me sometimes.
Okay, that's an interesting way to work. I've never heard that one's new. That was because I know, like, if you are you familiar with Miyazaki? Japan. Okay, so
I'm not
the Japanese
a hardcore follower, but I know I do. Yes.
Yeah, his movies, like, they don't start off with a script. He just starts writing it. They start drawing it. Like, he'll do his thumbnails, and he'll pass it along to his team, and they just draw it, and then he creates that story until it hits the end of the movie. And I was like, that is insane.
Yeah. I mean, see that doing with the way I do it. But my goodness, a movie, that's crazy. But hey, like I said, I'm not a hardcore follower, but I'm aware of it, and I can imagine. I mean, he's a legend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's pulled it off plenty of times. I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
All right, so now that's interesting. Now the other things that you've worked on with other people, were they like tight scripts, or were they like Marvel style scripts where they would give you like a scene, a setting, and then say, okay, go do what you do?
They were scripts. They were direction and the whole 9 yards. And had they not been the people that they were, I probably would have done some more improving. But I wasn't about to change. I followed what they wanted. I was very respectful about it because I was extremely grateful that they gave me the opportunity. So, but they were scripted, full Marvel, full scripted out. Tell me direction, dialogue, everything.
Right. Okay, well that's cool. I mean, I know, yeah, because now, all right. So when you're doing your breakdowns for your stories, right? Are you doing like small thumbnail type things and then blowing them up, or are you just doing
go right to page?
Go right.
The thumbnails in my head, and I tried doing like I said, it's a process.
Yeah.
And I tried every little thing that you look at all these people that give you pointers and ideas about how to do stuff like this. And so I tried it, and it's some kind of stuck, some didn't. And I felt like the thumbnails, I would draw off the thumbnails, and then when I went to the full page, the thumbnails looked better than what I was putting on the page. And I kind of felt like I lost a step of freshness because now here's this little thumbnail that I really took a lot of time with as far as the layout and the camera angles and whatever. And then when I got the page, I kind of felt like I lost some energy in it. But yeah, I go straight to I have a skeleton for every issue, but each page I know what I need to have done, and I let myself kind of flow.
Right.
I know what I need to do from that first panel to that last panel as far as the story that I have planned on each page, and I just let it flow. I know what's the pacing, how much do I need to go with it, just like if I was doing a thumbnail page. Right. And I do very loose because I also ink it. So my pencils are very loose by the time I get to the inking stage. That's another process that I also kind of improv. I'll change something as I ink it. So yeah, the thumbnail thing I tried, and I just kind of felt like, well, these are better than what I'm putting on full page. And it's like, why am I doing this? So I just kind of cut the thumbnails out.
Right. Now, you working a standard 11 by 17?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Well, I mean, that 9-panel grid thing. Oof.
I've
Are you a
only done
fan?
Yeah, I've done it once just to say, my son, he colors the book for me. It's a
Mm.
family affair, and so he's about the only one I actually talk to about the story. And
Mm.
I'll do some things just to, because 9-panel grid, we kid about it a little bit. And so
Mm.
for one issue, I did a 9-panel grid, and he didn't know it before he colored it. He got to the page, and he had to stop and we had to have a conversation about it. But I just did it for as far as a lark. I hit that page and I thought, I've got a lot of dialogue, and so I'm gonna do that 9-panel page and see what happens. And yeah, I probably wouldn't do it again. I did it once. I probably wouldn't do it again.
Gotcha. No, I understand. I understand. I've read Watchmen a lot of times, and
Yeah,
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 Tom King.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't think that should be. I respected how Watchmen do some of it, but I
Mm.
think if anybody else does it and they use that same Watchmen word in the trying to describe why they did the 9-panel page, and they probably shouldn't have done that 9-panel page.
Right.
But I digress on that. So
No, I got you. All right. So let's get down to talking about your book a little bit. Man in the Mask. I mean, what got you? Like, how long have you been doing it? Because I've only been seeing it recently. So how long have you been working on it?
I came up with the story in the late '90s. I got interested in self-publishing. I really got into that little movement in the mid '90s of Terry Moore and Jeff
Mm.
Smith and Colleen Doran and
Mm.
all those. I really kind of, again, it goes back to me being the one-man army. I wanted to do something that was all me. And of course, the very first idea I come up with is a black and white superhero book, and we all know, especially at that time, how much that was popular for indie comics.
Mm.
Um, so I kind of came up with an idea of kind of blending a lot of stuff because, as much of a superhero fan as I am and was at the time, I also got into those more inflected stories, those stories about people, and I kind of wanted to make a book, kind of reflecting a lot of stuff that I loved about comics. And when I was trying to really ground it, I had an original idea with it, and I tried it out, and I didn't like the end result. I
Mm.
drew actually a whole book with the idea of kind of the costume that I use today. But I didn't really like it. It just didn't really speak to me on the level of trying to get the humanity I wanted. And I have to say that I kind of, also being again back being a Matt Wagner fan, I was a huge fan of Mage, and
Mm.
I really liked the way he incorporated things about his life or the people that he knew into it. And I thought, well, that would be kind of along the same lines of what I wanted to achieve with Man in the Mask, which is kind of a humanity and blending not only the love of my comics, but I also wanted to kind of do something that was I guess you could say, a tribute to my grandfather, because he was probably the one guy that always supported my crazy dream of wanting to draw comics. There
Mm.
weren't a lot of supportive people that thought comics were a good idea for me, and he never wavered on that. He always thought that if that's what you want to do, that's exactly what you needed to do. And in trying to craft the story, I had this idea of based off of a story. He would always tell me stories. He was a great storyteller.
Mm.
And one of the stories he told me was that he was a coal miner, and he had been given the news that he had black lung in his early 50s, which
Mm.
essentially meant he had to quit his job. And he wasn't very happy about it, very despondent about it. And he would always tell me the story about one of the things that helped him get over it was my arrival on this earth, my
Mm.
birth, because he would looked into the nursery the day I was born and said, I'm going to be a good grandfather to this kid. And that story always kind of touched me. It really, in addition to him being my best friend and being my biggest encourager, I thought, what if I kind of seeded this foundation of his story that this guy who had been a masked character in the 50s and the 60s, what if he got to a situation where he realized that one day maybe he wasn't going to be as able and that maybe he wanted to pass it along? And I thought about that nursery story, and I thought, well, why doesn't that work in comics? You know, because that was one of the foundations I really, like I said, I liked the humanity of it. And that was kind of the foundation. That was where I got started with it. And I thought, you know, what if my lead character is basically a legacy to his grandfather, that he's basically carrying on this dream that his grandfather had, and then also making it kind of his own. And that was kind of the basis of it. And as I've gotten over the years, I've tried to flesh it out, even if I wasn't actively developing it. But that's where the roots of it was. It was based on, like I said, it's a love of comics, and it's also a love of my grandfather. It's kind of like, thank you. You know, that's the other part of it. It's you know, I tell people that even though I guess you could look at them that they're my fictional version of me and my fictional version of my grandfather, probably the grandfather in the book is a lot closer to my grandfather than I am to the other guy. But I just wanted to use it as a basis. I wanted to use it as a kind of, as a touchstone, because a lot of us don't know what it is to be from Krypton and lift things over our head. I think a lot of us, you know, we know a special person in our life that always encouraged us. And where does that go? You know, where does that go? And you also have the idea of, well, he thought I was so special that, you know, he wanted to give me something that was really special to him. And then that's kind of where I went with it. I kind of just incorporated that idea. And you know, I always kind of looked at him the same way I looked at the Golden Age heroes of DC. You know, they were youthful despite their age. You know, he was in World War II. And, you know, he never looked his age, never acted his age. You know, he was a lot more spry than I was. You know, he would take us on hikes, me and my brother, and we'd be ready to kill over halfway up the hill. And you know, he was, you know, like, what's taking you guys so long? And so I said it was hard not to imagine him as a hero. It was hard not to see him as a character. And when I was trying to build the lineage out, I gravitated to the idea that if he was a hero, he would be a guy in a suit and a mask, and that'd be simple as that. Because you know, he was the guy that went to McDonald's in a suit. He was always dressed to the nines. He was always well dressed, and it was kind of, you know, I feel like a lot of the basis of the book kind of fell in my lap, and sometimes I don't want to tell too much because I feel like, you know, I'm giving away, you know, that maybe I have any talent to begin with, because a lot of the stuff kind of fell in my lap because I was lucky. But you know, that's the origin of the book. And even though it took me a long time to actually realize it, which, like I only realized it, I only made a real commitment to it about 4 or 5 years ago. But it was always building when I could, you know, on the cracks of whatever job I was in the middle of, or that kind of thing. It was always in my head, and like I said, I'm actualizing it now.
No, that's fantastic. It's a wonderful story. I mean, I think that's great. I mean, you know, not enough of us, I guess, incorporate that type of reality into their work, you know, or at least not consciously. You know what I mean? Because you made a conscious decision. Because sometimes the stuff will bleed through. You know?
Yeah. I think there's always some truth to people in their work. But I guess some of us hang it out there a little bit harder, because I'm very, I'm proud of what I did, what I've done with it, and what I'm trying to do with it.
No, like I said, it looks great. It was a fantastic story. Now, here's a question for you. So you're working with your son, right? Who's your colorist. Now, does he eventually get incorporated into the story?
You know, I've thought about that, but where it's taken me so long to do the story, the things I have in my head that I wanted to do with it, the character just isn't to that point yet. I mean, it'll be a while before that happens. I mean, I may be seeding it a little bit right now, but it's not a disservice to him. It's just the fact that taken so long to do it. He's not quite. I mean, he's me maybe 20 years ago. It just
right.
From that perspective, I think if I had jumped in to do a father-son story, I don't think I could have pulled it off well because, there was a lot of layoff, a lot of rust in actually doing it. And I kind of wanted to preserve my original story with the idea, hey, maybe I'll get lucky enough to do a story long enough to do that. But he helps me out quite a bit with it.
All right, cool. Now, with the current run, I mean, how long? Like, are you doing like one shot single stories, or do you have like a longer frame story that you're telling? What type of story you're doing?
The way I went into it, over the years that I wasn't actively developing it, I knew that I wanted to do a graphic novel because, again, I knew the idea of indie comics, and unfortunately, sometimes when you get a first issue, you don't necessarily get a second for whatever reason. Maybe the creator loses interest, or the creator doesn't have the money to do the books. So the very, very first thing I did was I decided to do a graphic novel, and the way of introducing the story and introducing the characters, and at the first I thought maybe I bit off too much because I expected it to be a length, and trying to do it during a day job and just living a life, and it ended up being 120 pages by the time I got done with it.
Right.
And I wasn't quite sure if I was going to continue because that was the story I wanted to tell. And I was so happy with myself that I had achieved that. I wanted to do a particular story to start everything off to what happens after the graphic novel. So I'm on the second issue of that. But I've done little one-off stories that I've offered because once I hit the con circuit, I knew the graphic novel would be kind of a hard sell at $20. But I wanted to offer little issues, and so I came up with some short stories. So I've done little one-off stories that I've been pretty happy with. But the book I'm working on right now, it's a series, and it doesn't have, it's not finite. I've got storylines, and I've got the way I want to go with it, and so I've got a set story in place that each part kind of adds to the mythos.
Gotcha. Now, do you have like an overarching story arc that you? Okay. All right. Cool.
Yeah. Like I said, even though it's a loose skeleton, I know kind of where I want him to go because again, the story it diverted in the graphic novel. It's the idea of legacy, but also the idea of legacy and what you add to it, opposed to maybe following the line. So the graphic novel basically gives you the relationship and the predicament and the situation. The series is more of how does this guy take it from there when he actually has the mask and it's kind of in place. So it's more now of a story of I have this history, but now it's my turn to apply what I can add to it and add to my own legend, so to speak, and kind of a very selfless way. It doesn't, by saying live up to a legend or make my own legend, I don't want to make it sound like the character is arrogant, but he also wants and knows that part of the legacy is doing his own way, making it his own way, because that's part of another thing his grandfather instilled with him is the idea of maybe I can go in another direction and I'm not making light of where I came from, but I'm just adding my own note to it. I'm adding my own, I'm not that same person. I may have thought one day when I was 9 years old that maybe I was going to be this guy, but when you get older and you see things in a different perspective, that's kind of the way the series I'm working on is going. This is now his time and his way of doing things. That's maybe not necessarily the way his grandfather would do it, but that doesn't mean that he's cheapening his grandfather's legacy. It's just kind of he's being him, which is exactly what was intended.
Right.
So it's being your own thing. It's being your own thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I got you. I got you. You know, he doesn't want to be his grandfather, but he doesn't want to, you know, maybe stray away too far from that sensibility.
Exactly. I mean, because if you walk that line, you're not really being that true aspect.
Right.
You know, you have to sometimes walk that line.
Yeah.
And that's the part of the story that interests me the most when I was trying to develop as a series, because I couldn't keep on the story I did. The graphic novel is very different. It's a very different tone because the graphic novel was something I always put in the back of my head that one day I would do it, and then when I actualized it, I realized that if I did more, it couldn't be that same tone because I was a different person when I came up with that story. I was a different thought. And so if I was going to continue the story, I knew it had to change. The tone had to change. And so it went from maybe this kid who had stars in his eyes and, maybe his own assumptions of how his life was going to turn out. And as we all know, life doesn't turn out the way we expect it to.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically it's his aftermath. What does he do now? That he actually has that realization that it's his time, and his time doesn't mean someone else's time. It's his time.
Right.
How does he do it?
Right. Okay. That sounds really interesting. I like that. Now, how deep are you into the story as far as what you've been doing?
I'm on the second issue. I'm ending the second issue this week because with no cons, I made the decision that even though I was selling my books at cons, I realized with no cons this year, and I had material, I had to figure out what to do with them.
Right.
And so I decided to offer the book as a webcomic that I was putting up on my website for free. Because, the way I look at it, I put a lot of time into this, and I'm not in it for the money because there is no money when you get right down to it. So I'm doing this for the enjoyment. And so I decided to put the book up for free so people could look at it and read it and just enjoy it if they did. And so, again, I'm a little behind the ball as far as where I would like to be, progress-wise.
Right.
It's at the end of the second issue, but I think this coming week when people read it, I think they'll get an idea where I'm going and understand that, I've got an idea. I'm not just kind of loosely throwing things out there, but this is, because when you do a first issue, I tried to throw a lot of story elements in it so that I could play with it later on. But the second issue is probably more the tone of the book. It's not that, throw everything in there and see what develops. There's a very directed story in the second issue. And again, it sets what I'm trying to do with it. It's got its own vibe.
Okay, cool. Now, so the first, I guess, story arc is going to have 4 issues.
Right now it's 5.
Oh, it's 5 issues. Okay, cool.
It's going to be 5 issues. Yeah. Originally it was going to be 6, and then I realized I didn't need that much space. It's just going to be 5 issues, and then after I get it done, I'll probably do a bunch of little shorts.
Right.
But I feel like this initial storyline needed to have the traditional 22, 24 page, 5 issues to kind of tell it. And then it would give me room because 5 issues allows me to create the new world, the new reality for my current character. And then afterwards, it gives me a lot of latitude that I can do these shorter type stories that will vary up some of the things that just won't maybe keep me in one little mold, but allow me to kind of do a lot of transition into different kinds of links.
Right.
Because, the shorter stories do appeal to me because I think you can get some things done in 8 pages, whereas if you have to stretch it to 22, 24, sometimes you kind of lose the spark.
Right.
And so, but until I get the story out and really sets the world up for me to be able to do that, I wanted to kind of stay true to getting the story arc out. But I've got a pretty good pace right now, so I've got at least a good working at these 5 issues will get actualized, opposed to the typical, I've got to make room for it. So I've if anything, the web comic translating it to web has allowed me to figure out a good workspace, opposed to just doing it when I could, printing it and then selling it for a couple months at a con, and then go work on another one. The web comic now is giving me a schedule. It's allowing me to, kind of do that fanboy dream of doing a monthly comic that you maybe had many years ago. When with indie comics, it's just not possible. Especially if you just sell at cons. Cons are very infrequent. I can only hit so many. So really, the game plan I came up with was just to do one comic at a time and sell it, and then get to the next one when I could. So now I've got a good schedule, and I hope to really develop the world now.
Oh, that's cool. Now, have you ever considered, let's say, something like Kickstarter or Indiegogo?
Probably the only thing that I would do Kickstarter or Indiegogo for is once I hit that 5 issues to do a trade or something. I don't disrespect anybody that does the individual issues, but I think that kind of stuff's a lot better to do for collections. I'm less likely just to pick up a single issue on either one. I like collections, but right now doing the individual issues, especially now doing it free online, because I'm also going to translate them to, I'll print up some copies and then I'll have it available at Indie Planet. That way, people who like them in print, because I do have a little bit of some people that prefer print comics opposed to reading off screen. So I wanted to have it available and print on demand on Indie Planet. Kind of still lets me have that goal of having a print book. So the web comic feeds the print. It allows me to keep a schedule, and so then I can actually print out a lot better at a better pace. But probably I would say Kickstarter and Indiegogo for trade, for collection.
All right. Cool. That's probably the way to go for it. I do individual books, but I usually tend to offer them 3 at a time.
Okay.
So I would only offer, I'll offer 3 issues 1 through 3, and then then we'll build from there. So, and the way I look at it is like this. My concept is almost the way Marvel and DC treat it. It's like a lost lead before you get to the trade. So you sell some books, and then you'll hopefully sell even more of the trade. So, because because I have an artist that I pay, so I have to try to generate some type of capital to cover that cost. It's not easy, but it's my very expensive hobby.
You're very right about that. A lot of the stuff that I do because I can't pay somebody else to do it. I'm not exactly a happy inker, but I do it because I'm not about to let somebody do it for free. I know I've had offers from friends that are in comics that they would ink the book for me, and I would love the collaboration, but I just couldn't allow them to do it for free. I just couldn't do that, and I just don't have the funds to be able to pay somebody to do something.
Yeah,
so I would rather just do it myself. And while I'm not maybe 100% happy with my ink, oddly enough, it's starting to be my style. So it's interesting. Something I didn't really want to do. Now I'm having a hard time seeing it done in a different way. So I've gone from not wanting to get an inker because I can't pay them until now. I don't want to change them.
See?
It's funny how things work.
Yeah. Now, when you ink, are you using crow quills, brushes? What's your favorite method?
No, actually, I'm digital. It's interesting. I'm a very, very hybrid situation. I pencil on board, and that's because I try to keep that way I used to do it in my bedroom, drawing on a little board and coming up with it, and then I scan it and I ink it, and everything else is digital. The only thing, like I said, the penciling is the only thing it's by hand and with no. I've tried penciling on my tablet, but I just don't like it. It doesn't give me that real And again, the inking used to be kind of a little bit of a chore, but I have to admit, again, one of the benefits of being able to offer the webcomic a little more, I'm working more on it. So now that I'm working more on it, I'm actually kind of, I'm not seeing it as a chore or something I have to do. But no, I'm digital. After the penciling stage, I'm purely digital.
That's interesting. Now, so are you working on a Cintiq?
I'm working on a Unova. I didn't want to spend the Wacom until I got comfortable with this kind of work setup.
Mm-hmm.
So probably my next one will be a Wacom, but I wasn't going to spend $1,000-some in something I may not have been able to use. So I tried one of the cheaper ones. Actually, it does pretty good. I'm happy with the way some of the stuff comes out. But yeah, if this goes down at this stage, I'd buy a Wacom. But I wasn't going to do it initially.
Right.
It was me not ever using something like this before, and I thought, well, I hate to buy $1,000, weight that I would never use because I don't like it. So I wanted to go with a little cheaper. But yeah, this I think this with Clip Studio and the whole 9 yards, it turned out a lot better than I thought it would be.
Yeah. My wife's an artist, and she's old school, pen and ink, but she started using a Cintiq probably about 5-6 years ago, and she would tell me how much she hated it. Right, so she hates it, hates this thing. She'll put it to the side. I'm not going to use that thing. Then we had a friend who went down to Colombia for 6 months, and he says, "Can you guys hold on to my Wacom tablet?" And he had a huge 36-inch one. And
wow.
Yeah, he had a this thing was huge. And we were like, sure. So and we held on to it, and she plugged it in. She fell in love with it. And I just think it was just because the one she had was a tiny one. And then she got this big one. She was like, oh. Then when he came back, she was like, oh man, I got to give it back. So we gave it back to him, obviously. And then, then she went out and got her own. So yeah, it's just a matter, I guess, just working on it. So.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, I've got a 21-inch one, and it does very well. But as my eyes change, I'm sure a bigger one would be much appreciated. Once I went to another, like I said, if this one ever goes down, it'll be a bigger one, and it'll be a Wacom because I know they're a lot more robust to what this kind of work is.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can understand that 36 would be pretty cool.
Oh yeah. I think she only got the 24-inch one. Now I think that's what she has. So she was like, all right, she wasn't gonna spend. I don't know. I don't even remember what it was. A couple grand on it, the big one. So I don't know if it was 3,000 or whatever. She was like, she was like, I have work coming in, but not that much work. So, well, it's all good. All right, so Mike, we've been at this for a few minutes, so we're close to wrapping up, but we're not there just yet. I got a few more questions for you. All right. So first, before we even move on to any of those questions, one, where can people find your work, and where can people purchase your work?
Okay, amkcomics.com is where I host the webcomic. Pretty much you go there and you've got a selection of the stuff that I've already posted. My print stuff is at indiecomics.com/amkcomics. I've got 5 or 6 books there that people can buy. I tried trying to make orders myself, but I found that it was a lot simpler, as far as letting somebody else fulfill. Again, I had enough on my plate with creating the comic, again, my day job, and, being a dad and husband and fulfilling stuff was not easy. So even though I do have a store, I don't, there's a link on my Facebook page for a store, but I don't scream about it too much. I prefer to let you plan it, and because Barry and Tommy do a great job of fulfilling stuff. They do a great job. I think the books look really good. So I'll leave it to better hands than mine to get the stuff out.
Right.
I do offer a few books free for digital download if people who are indie comics prefer, that kind of thing. They can see the work and see examples of my stuff. But yeah, that's generally between the website and Indemand. Those are two places to find my stuff. And cons, when they come back on,
Right.
I'll have them at cons. But that's not unfortunately soon. So that's where you find it.
Yeah, it's gonna be a while before we get back to those. So, all right, cool. Now,
yeah, I miss them because
yeah, sorry about that. I think we have a little bit of a lag.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So now, I'm brain farting. All right. What? Oh yes, this question. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you wanted to talk about or wanted to discuss?
I think we pretty much hit it. I'm in indie comics for the do-it-yourself situation. I mean,
Mm,
I really love the aesthetics of being my own thing.
right.
How I want to do it. It fits my mold. I'm a lone warrior. I'm a lone ranger, so to speak.
Mm,
It kind of fits my personality. While again, as I mentioned earlier, I have worked with other people, but in the end of it, it's pretty much my son has a hard enough time working with me when I want him to change something. So, but I think he's got the indie bug also. So as I told him when I tell him to do something over, I said, "You do your own comic, and I won't say a word
mm,
about that. You can, But as far as that goes, but indie comics are, I think that it's the growth industry. I mean, the sales may
mm,
not reflect it, but I think that as far as vitality, as far as freshness, I think that there's a spirit out there that certainly the mainstream don't even remotely get close to as they're trying to figure out exactly who they're marketing to.
mm,
And that's the thing. I mean, I think with indie comics, you have when you buy somebody, and that's why I mentioned to somebody else that are in comics. I think that I think along with liking your idea, they also buy into you.
right.
You're a large part of the sale too. I've sold to many people that may have not wanted to, maybe didn't think they'd pick up my book, but once having a conversation and we find some shared ideas, and they pick up the book and they later tell me how much they liked it. I think a lot of that there's a symbiosis there. There's a little connection there that happens between people, and I think indie comics really reflect that. I think they when someone buys into you, it's like with the Kickstarter and Indiegogo. People are
Mm,
buying into you. I mean, they do like your idea, but I think they also realize they're buying into you, and I think that's the great attraction of indie comics.
yep. I agree. Um, now,
Yeah.
all right. So let's get into some of my goofy questions. All right. So, first, um, okay. So you are a lone wolf, so this one's going to be kind of interesting because this question I tend to ask the publishers, and and I have a lot of writers on, but I'll ask anyway. If you had the choice of any artist that you could have come on and maybe do a guest cover for you, living or dead, don't worry about a budget, who would you get?
The fanboy in me would ask Burn.
Mm,
I just couldn't not. I mean, I would ask others, of course. Again, Matt Wagner, um, but those two would probably be the two. As far as I can't think of anybody passed away. I mean, I'm lucky still some of the things that I treasure that they're still with us and still creating.
yeah.
But yeah, it'd be a tie between Wagner and Burn.
Okay.
Probably Wagner maybe a little bit over Burn, but the fanboy in me would want a Burn cover something. I could not because it was I think some of my little artistic when you see a smile, it's a Burn smile sometimes. It just
Mm,
I can't help but draw a Burn smile when I draw a smile because it's in my head.
right.
But yeah, it'd probably be those two.
Yeah.
I wouldn't hesitate if money wasn't an issue, or yeah,
Mm,
probably those two.
gotcha. It's funny. I recently interviewed a gentleman by the name of Chris Malgrane. from France, and he is a huge John Byrne fan, and you can see it heavily influenced in his work. It's fascinating. Yeah. So yeah, I thought that was really cool. But all right, moving on. Now, if you got the call up, like let's say you got the golden ticket, and you got the call up from the big companies, and they said, Mike, come on up. We want you to pick your book, pick your character, you know, and it doesn't matter, Marvel, DC, could be any of the other companies, you know. Who would you want to do?
The Question.
Okay.
You know, I think that the Question was a very big influence on me drawing suits and ties and hats and fedoras, and also, you know, with this avalanche of superheroes after Crisis and DC in '86 and '87, here was this very thoughtful, very introspective, you know, not really superhero, and I hung on every word that Denny O'Neil wrote. And the art by Dennis Cowan was it just, you know, those things were big, and the Question is definitely probably somebody I would want to try, you know, because everybody's got a story of a particular character, and while, you know, Superman and Batman will always be kind of up there, or even Daredevil for Marvel, the Question would probably be the one that I would try to shoot for the most, just because I have a very in my head direction that I would go with him, because I just think it's a fascinating character. Between the version Ditko did, but especially the O'Neil character, I think it would be hard not to want to do something, but also put my own spin on it. You know, some other element that, you know, isn't what they've done before. I would want to give it a try. But yeah, the Question, yeah. You know, it may not be a lot of people's choices, but it'd be mine.
That's okay. I have weirdo one. It's funny. I had another guest ask me who I would pick. One of mine is Captain Paragon. So it's like, and who even knows who that is?
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
Yep.
I got you.
Yep. So it's just like, you know, old AC Comics character. So, all right. So now, I have some comparatives to ask you. So, you know, it's like a little game I like to play. So I'll softball you with a couple of them, and then we'll work our way into some of the more interesting ones. Godzilla or Gamera?
Godzilla.
Okay. Captain America or Batman?
Captain America.
Okay.
I'm in the Boy Scouts. I'm in, you know, I love Batman, good motivation, but I have to say I'm in the Boy Scouts. I'm the guy that liked the vanilla, you know, Cyclops. You know, I like the good guys. So yeah, Captain America.
Okay, fair enough. Let's see, RPGs or video games?
Video games. Never got the role playing.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. Lord of the Rings or Star Wars?
Star Wars. I equated Lord of the Rings probably with D&D and role playing games. I never got into it.
Gotcha.
Well, probably a lot of people were casting whatever, but I never got into Lord of the Rings.
Okay, that's fine. Stan Lee or Jack Kirby?
That's a tougher one. Probably Kirby. Kirby, but I don't go with much shade on Stan as I probably did when I was younger. I mean, but yeah, Kirby.
Okay, fair enough. Will Eisner or Toth?
Eisner.
Okay.
I'm an extreme Eisner nut, and I respect Toth and his look, but Eisner.
Okay.
Undeniable.
Yeah, I got to meet him one time. Very nice gentleman. God bless his soul.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Let's see. You know, it's funny. I was doing these hardcore for about a month and a half. I took a week off, and I'm all discombobulated.
It's something you don't do every day. I can see it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's funny. No, because I was doing it. I did it for like 3 months running. I was doing like 4 or 5 interviews a day. I mean, a week. No, a week, not a day. Yeah. So okay. I was doing a bunch of them. And then, now I took a week off, and I'm like, oh, where am I? Here's one that I think is a little unfair, but I'm going to ask anyway. Byrne or Perez?
Byrne.
Yeah, that's
what
yeah.
Mm-hmm. I respect Perez, but I never was the Perez head. I was a Byrne head.
Gotcha. All right. So I'm going to ask you a couple more of these, and then we'll wrap it up. Frazetta or Boris?
Oh, probably Frazetta.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Cool.
It's definitely not a style I got into as far as drawing myself, but I certainly respect it.
Oh yeah. I mean, any man who can suffer a stroke and then teach himself how to draw with his other hand. Yeah. Disney or Miyazaki?
Disney, just because I'm more familiar with Disney. I would not want to put that,
All right. I'll ask you one last one. Bernie Wrightson or Barry Windsor Smith?
Probably Wrightson, because Swamp Thing and Cycle of the Werewolf and Frankenstein, that's hard work not to acknowledge. Just absolute masterpieces I mean, the guy was a craftsman. That's not saying, but yeah, Wrightson, without a doubt.
No. I mean, both gentlemen are incredible. I mean, Barry Windsor Smith is, the guy is just phenomenal. It's a shame he doesn't do as much comic work, as he once did. But
when I first was exposed to his work, he would do those one-off X-Men stories.
Mm-hmm.
I would think that it's like, hey, where's Romita Jr. at? But as I got older, it's like, hey, I can respect this Barry Windsor Smith stuff, because I didn't get it when I was, younger. I got the art style later, but he's great.
Oh yeah. All right. So Mike, we made it. We made it to the end.
Right? Decent guest, I hope.
Yeah, no, you're fantastic, man. Thank you. But one more time, do me a favor. Let the fans know where they can find you and find your work.
Well, again, amkcomics.com.
Mm-hmm.
You can catch me on Instagram and Facebook under my name, and also my publishing, the AMK Comics. I've got a Facebook page for that, where again, all those places I pretty much show previews and any kind of news that I've got to pass along. So, if you want to friend me up, go right ahead. Same way with Twitter. I'm not as much on Twitter, but you can find me Mike W. Belcher 1 on Twitter. That's pretty much it. And I occasionally do what we're doing right now with Silverline Comics on Sunday night, Roland Mann's company.
Okay.
I'm one of the talking heads on that screen. So I don't probably talk as much as the others do, but occasionally I'll get something in. But that's another place you can find me. But yeah, definitely, anybody more than, check out the comic, check out my story. I want as many people as I can to look at, because I'm pretty proud of it.
All right, cool. All right, so Mike, thank you so much. Guys, please like, subscribe, share out the video. Let everybody know we're here. We're going to have more guests coming on soon. And please, go check out Mike's work. The stuff looks incredible. Man in the Mask. Go pick up some copies, because I'm going to pick up a few copies, and I'm going to enjoy that book. Thank you so much. Have a great night, everybody. Oh, and go check out the Oswald Chronicles on Indiegogo, and I'll talk to you later. Have a good night. Bye.